At my grandson's graduation party, I handed him an envelope. My daughter-in-law snatched it, peeked inside, and laughed. A savings bond? From 1,996? She waved it like a napkin. My son didn't even look up. "Mom, we talked about this. If you can't bring a real gift, just bring a dish." 50 guests heard that. 50 guests watched me stand there in my good blouse from J.C. Penney while my own son told me my gift wasn't good enough. I picked up the envelope from the table where she'd tossed it, put it back in my purse, and walked to my car without a word. The next Monday, I called my accountant. "Robert," I said, "start the process. All of it." He paused. "Dorothy, are you sure? Once we begin, there's no reversing this. I've never been more sure of anything." "Hey, quick question before we go on. Have you ever given everything to your family and had them treat you like you were nothing? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And hit subscribe if you want to hear what happened when my son found out his cafeteria lady mother owned his house. Some details here are fictionalized for storytelling, but the lesson is completely real. Now, back to what happened. The graduation party was held at my son's house in Ridgewood, New Jersey. 4 bedrooms, finished basement, backyard with a stone patio and a built-in grill that cost more than my first car. My son, Kevin, had moved in 3 years ago with his wife, Megan, and their 2 kids. He was a marketing director at a pharmaceutical company. Good salary, nice title. The kind of job that made people nod with approval at dinner parties. Megan came from money. Her parents owned a chain of dry cleaners across Bergen County. She'd grown up with private tennis lessons and summer houses on the shore. From the day Kevin brought her home, she'd looked at me the way you'd look at a stain on a white sofa. Politely, carefully, like she was trying to figure out how to remove me without making a scene. I worked in the cafeteria at Franklin Elementary. Had for 22 years. Hairnet, rubber gloves, serving trays of chicken nuggets and mashed potatoes to 6-year-olds who sometimes remembered to say thank you. My shift started at 6 in the morning and ended at 2 in the afternoon. I smelled like fryer oil most days. My shoes had non-slip soles. My back ached by noon. That's what my son saw when he looked at me. A 63-year-old woman who served lunch to children. What he didn't see was what I did between 1,991 and now. I drove home from the graduation party that afternoon and sat in the kitchen of my 1-bedroom apartment in Hackensack. Rent controlled, $700 a month. I'd lived there since Kevin was in middle school. The walls were thin enough to hear my neighbor's television. The radiator clanked every winter like it was trying to escape. I opened the hall closet and pulled out the fireproof box I kept behind the vacuum cleaner. Inside were the documents I never showed anyone. 31 property deeds, commercial and residential, spread across northern New Jersey, 2 in Manhattan, 1 warehouse in Newark. Total portfolio value as of last quarter, $28 million. It started in 1991. I was 28, freshly divorced, raising Kevin alone on a cafeteria worker's salary. My ex-husband left me with nothing except a checking account and a stubborn refusal to feel sorry for myself. I picked up a second job cleaning office buildings at night. Every dollar I didn't spend on rent or Kevin's shoes went into savings. In 1993, a duplex on Elm Street in Passaic went into foreclosure, $41,000. Everyone I knew said I was crazy. A lunch lady buying property. I bought it with cash I'd saved for 2 years, fixed the plumbing myself from a library book, and rented both units to nurses from St. Mary's Hospital. The rent from that duplex bought the next property. And the next. 1 building every 18 months for 30 years. I learned to read leases, negotiate with contractors, understand zoning laws, all while serving sloppy joes at 7:30 in the morning. I never told Kevin. I wanted him to grow up understanding that hard work had dignity, that a woman in a hairnet deserved the same respect as a woman in a boardroom. I thought if he didn't know about the money, he'd love me for who I was. Instead, he grew up embarrassed. He stopped inviting friends over in high school. He introduced me at his college graduation as my mom. She works in food service with a tone that made food service sound like a disease. When he married Megan, he seated me at the back table, behind a pillar, where none of the Driscoll family would have to make small talk with the cafeteria lady. I pulled another document from the box, a property deed for 114 Ridgewood Avenue, Kevin's house. He didn't know I owned it. He thought he'd gotten a miraculous deal 3 years ago. Below market price, seller motivated. The seller was a trust managed by my accountant, Robert Hale. My money. My property. My son lived in my house and was ashamed to sit next to me at a graduation party. The savings bond Megan had laughed at was worth $42,000. I'd purchased it in 1996, the year my grandson Marcus was born. With accumulated interest, it had matured into something meaningful. Not millions, but enough for a semester of college or a reliable car. I'd written a note inside the envelope. For Marcus, your grandmother believes in you. Love, Grandma Dot. Megan hadn't read the note. She'd seen the faded paper, the old-fashioned format, and decided it was worthless. I closed the fireproof box. Tomorrow I'd call Robert and begin unwinding everything. But first, I needed to make one more call. The phone rang twice. A woman answered, "Whitfield and Associates, how may I direct your call?" "I need to speak with Janet Whitfield. Tell her it's Dorothy Callahan." Janet Whitfield had been my attorney for 15 years. She knew every LLC, every trust, every property in my portfolio. She'd drawn up the paperwork when I purchased Kevin's house through a blind trust. Dorothy. Janet's voice was warm but careful. She knew me well enough to hear something in my tone. What's happened? I need a full audit of Kevin's finances. His wife's too. Something's off. Off how? Their spending doesn't match his salary. New kitchen renovation. That boat last summer. Megan's car. I've been watching for a while, and the math doesn't work. Janet paused. You want me to dig into your own son's finances. I want to protect my grandson. There's a difference. I'll need a week. Take 5 days. I hung up and sat in the quiet of my apartment. The refrigerator hummed, sighed, a siren wailed down River Street and faded. I stared at the envelope on the kitchen table. The savings bond Megan had laughed at, the note she hadn't bothered to read. 5 days later, Janet Whitfield sat across from me at her office in Paramus. The conference room smelled like coffee and paper. Janet was 55, sharp-featured, the kind of lawyer who wore reading glasses on a chain and never raised her voice because she didn't need to. She opened a folder. You were right to be concerned. I leaned forward. Kevin's salary at Archer Pharmaceuticals is $132,000 a year. After taxes, mortgage, and standard expenses, he should have roughly $2,000 in discretionary spending per month. And he's spending $8,000 a month. Minimum. Janet slid a spreadsheet across the table. Country club dues, private school tuition for both kids, Megan's personal trainer, the boat payment, restaurant charges averaging $600 a week. Where's the extra money coming from? Janet turned to the next page. Megan's parents have been funneling money through a series of transfers. But that's not the problem. She looked at me over her glasses. The problem is where the Driscolls are getting it. Tell me. Their dry cleaning chain has been laundering money for the past 4 years. Cash-intensive business, easy to inflate revenues. The IRS has been circling them for 18 months. 3 of their locations are under audit. The room felt colder. Kevin knows? He's listed as a co-signer on 2 of the accounts the Driscolls use for transfers. Whether he understands what he signed is another question, but his name is on documents connected to money laundering. I sat back in my chair. My son, my boy who used to help me carry groceries up 3 flights of stairs, who drew me a Mother's Day card every year until he was 12, who now couldn't look at me without seeing a hairnet and an apron. He'd married into a family that was laundering money, and they'd pulled him in deep enough to leave fingerprints. What happens if the IRS completes their audit? Criminal referral. The Driscolls face tax evasion and money laundering charges. Kevin could be implicated as a knowing participant. Is he a knowing participant? Janet hesitated. Honestly, I think he signed what Megan told him to sign without reading it. But ignorance isn't a legal defense. What do I do? You have 2 options. Tell him now and hope he listens, or wait and let the IRS do it for you. I thought about the graduation party, the savings bond tossed on the table. If you can't bring a real gift, just bring a dish. If I warned Kevin now, he'd call Megan. Megan would call her parents. The Driscolls would shred documents, move money, cover tracks. And Kevin would never believe his cafeteria lady mother had uncovered a federal crime. There's a third option, I said. Janet raised an eyebrow. I contact the IRS myself, provide what we've found, and I make sure Kevin is protected before the walls come down. Dorothy, that means cooperating with a federal investigation against your daughter-in-law's family. It means saving my son from prison. Janet stared at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. I'll draft a proffer letter. We can approach the IRS Criminal Investigation Division with your documentation and negotiate immunity for Kevin in exchange for cooperation. How long? 2 weeks to get everything in order. Maybe 3. Make it 2. I left Janet's office and drove to Franklin Elementary. My shift had ended hours ago, but I parked in the lot and sat there watching the building where I'd spent 22 years. The cafeteria windows reflected the late afternoon sun. Inside, the trays were clean, the counters wiped down, the chairs stacked on tables. 22 years of waking up at 5 in the morning. 22 years of aching feet and grease burns, and children who needed a warm meal more than they needed anything else in the world. And my son thought that made me less than. I drove home, heated up leftover soup, and sat at my kitchen table with the IRS documents Janet had given me. 2 weeks. 14 days to prepare. 14 days before my son would learn who his wife really was, who his mother really was, and what it cost to confuse money with worth. Kevin called 4 times that week. I let each one go to voicemail. The first message was casual. Hey Mom, just checking in. Megan wants to know if you're coming to Marcus's baseball game Saturday. The second was slightly less casual. Mom, you haven't called back. Everything okay? The third was Megan. Her voice was tight, controlled. Dorothy, Kevin's worried about you. Also, we received a strange letter from the bank about the house, some kind of ownership verification request. Do you know anything about that? The fourth was Kevin again, late at night. Mom, please call me back. Something weird is going on. Megan's parents are acting strange and I don't know what's happening. I could really use your advice. I listened to that last voicemail 3 times. I could really use your advice. He hadn't said that since he was 19, since before Megan, before Ridgewood, before he decided his mother wasn't good enough for his new life. I almost called back. Almost. Then I remembered the graduation party. 50 people watching my son tell me to bring a dish next time instead of a gift. Megan waving that bond around like it was a joke. I put the phone down and went to bed. 12 days after my meeting with Janet, I got the call. We have a deal, she said. IRS Criminal Investigation has reviewed everything. They're prepared to offer Kevin full immunity in exchange for his cooperation and testimony regarding the Driscoll accounts. When do they move? They want to execute search warrants on the Driscoll dry cleaning locations next Tuesday. They'll need Kevin's statement before that. Arrange a meeting, this Sunday, at Kevin's house. His house? My house. The one I own at 114 Ridgewood Avenue. Janet was quiet for a beat. You're going to tell him everything at once. He needs to see all of it at the same time. The IRS, the house, the properties, all of it. Otherwise, he'll only believe the parts that are convenient. Sunday arrived gray and cool. Early October in New Jersey, leaves turning amber along the residential streets of Ridgewood. I drove past the house first without stopping. Kevin's car in the driveway, Megan's SUV beside it. The kids' bikes on the front lawn. I parked around the corner and called Janet. I'm here. The IRS agent will arrive at 2 o'clock. Agent Patricia Harmon. She's expecting you. Thank you, Janet. Dorothy, are you sure you want to do it this way? I've been sure for 30 years. I walked to the front door and knocked. Kevin answered in a sweatshirt and jeans, coffee mug in hand. Mom. He looked surprised, relieved, then wary. You haven't returned my calls. Can I come in? He stepped aside. The house smelled like Megan's candles. Vanilla and cedarwood. Expensive. The kitchen island was covered in Marcus's college brochures. Emma, my 14-year-old granddaughter, was on the couch watching something on her tablet. Hey, Grandma Dot. Emma waved without looking up. Hey, sweetheart. Megan appeared from the hallway, already dressed for brunch even though it was barely noon. White blouse, gold earrings, hair freshly blown out. She looked at me with that familiar expression. Patient. Tolerant. The way you'd look at someone else's dog that wandered into your yard. Dorothy, this is a surprise. We need to talk, all of us. Can we sit? Kevin and Megan exchanged a glance. The kind of married couple look that said, "What does she want now?" I'd seen it 100 times. We sat at the dining room table, the one I'd actually paid for, though they didn't know that either. "Kevin," I said, "I'm going to tell you some things, and I need you to listen all the way through before you react." He shifted in his chair. "Mom, you're scaring me." "Good. Scared means you're paying attention." I opened my bag and pulled out a folder, set it on the table between us. "First, this house, 114 Ridgewood Avenue. You think you bought it 3 years ago through a broker named James Leitner. We did buy it. You bought it from a trust called Callahan Holdings. My trust. I own this house, Kevin. I've owned it since 2018. You got below market pricing because I set the terms." Kevin stared at me. Megan's hand went to her throat. "That's impossible," Megan said. "You live in a 1-bedroom in Hackensack." "I do. By choice." I opened the folder. This is a summary of my property portfolio. 31 properties across New Jersey and New York. Total appraised value, $28 million. I started buying real estate in 1993 with money I saved from cleaning offices at night. I've been building this for 31 years. Kevin didn't move. His coffee mug was suspended halfway between the table and his mouth. "You're lying," Megan said flatly. "You're a cafeteria worker." "I am. I'm also a real estate investor, a landlord, and apparently the woman whose gift wasn't good enough for a graduation party." Kevin set his mug down slowly. "Mom, this is... Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I wanted to see if you'd respect me without knowing. I wanted to see who you'd become when you thought your mother had nothing." I paused. "You became someone who seated me behind a pillar at your wedding." His face flushed red. "But that's not why I'm here today." I pulled out the second folder. "Kevin, I had my attorney look into your finances." "You did what?" Megan's voice sharpened. "That's a violation of our privacy. Your parents' dry cleaning business has been laundering money for 4 years. The IRS has been auditing 3 of their locations. And Kevin's name is on 2 accounts connected to those transactions." The color drained from Megan's face. "That's insane," Kevin said. "I don't know anything about..." "You signed documents. Transfer authorizations. Your name is on bank accounts that received laundered funds. Megan told me those were investment accounts. Family accounts." She said her parents. He stopped, turned to his wife. "Megan?" Megan was staring at the table. Her hands were flat on the surface, perfectly still, but I could see a vein pulsing in her neck. "It's not what she's making it sound like," Megan said carefully. "My parents run a legitimate business. A legitimate business that deposits $30,000 in cash every week and reports double the actual revenue." I kept my voice even. Janet Whitfield pulled the records. "It's documented." Kevin pushed back from the table. "Mom, how do you even know any of this? You're a lunch lady." "I'm a lunch lady who reads financial statements better than your wife reads them to you." The doorbell rang. Megan flinched. Kevin looked at me. "Who is that?" "Someone who's going to help you, if you let her." I went to the door and opened it. Agent Patricia Harmon stood on the porch, mid-40s, dark blazer, credentials visible. Behind her, a second agent waited by the car. "Mrs. Callahan." She nodded at me. "Professional. Expected. Come in." Kevin stood up when he saw the badge. "Mom, what did you do?" "I saved your life." I stepped aside and let Agent Harmon enter. Agent Harmon introduced herself with the kind of calm authority that left no room for argument. She sat at the dining table, opened her own folder, and laid out the evidence. Bank records, cash deposits, wire transfers, Kevin's signature on accounts he'd never read carefully. Megan's at frozen. Kevin's hands trembled. "Mr. Callahan," Agent Harmon said, "your mother's attorney contacted our office 2 weeks ago. She provided documentation of your family's situation and negotiated an immunity agreement on your behalf." Kevin looked at me. "Immunity? Full immunity from prosecution in exchange for your cooperation and testimony regarding the Driscoll accounts. Your mother made this arrangement to protect you." My parents. Megan's voice was barely a whisper. What happens to my parents? Agent Harmon didn't sugarcoat it. Search warrants will be executed Tuesday morning. Your parents will be facing charges for tax evasion and money laundering. Megan stood up so fast her chair hit the wall. This is your fault. She pointed at me. You did this. You couldn't stand that Kevin married into a better family, so you destroyed us. I didn't flinch. I destroyed a crime. I saved my son. There's a difference. Kevin, tell her. Tell her she's wrong. Kevin sat with his head in his hands. He didn't speak for a long time. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. Did you know? He asked Megan. About the money. About what your parents were doing. Megan opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. It's complicated, she said. That was enough. Kevin nodded slowly, like a man absorbing a blow he'd seen coming but hoped would miss. Agent Harmon collected her documents. Mr. Callahan, we'll need your formal statement by Monday. She looked at me. Mrs. Callahan, thank you for your cooperation. After she left, the three of us sat in silence. Emma appeared in the doorway, tablet still in hand. Why is everyone so quiet? Go upstairs, honey, Kevin said. His voice cracked on the second word. Emma looked at me. She must have seen something in my face because she crossed the room and hugged me. Love you, Grandma Dot, she whispered and went upstairs. Megan left the house 20 minutes later. She packed a bag, called her parents, and drove away without saying goodbye. Kevin sat at the dining table, staring at the property portfolio I'd laid out. $28 million, he said. You really built all that. Every dollar. And you never told me because I wanted to know if my son would love his mother without a price tag. I sat down beside him. And when you told me to bring a dish instead of a gift, I got my answer. His face crumpled. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know. Megan, she always said you were. That you were holding us back. That my background was embarrassing. She said if I wanted Marcus and Emma to have the right opportunities, I needed to distance myself from the cafeteria lady. He nodded, crying now. I believed her. I let her make me ashamed of you. I put my hand on his arm. You let someone else decide what I was worth. Don't ever do that again. What do I do now? You show up on Monday. You tell the truth. You cooperate. And then you figure out who you are without Megan telling you. And us? You and me? That depends on you. How do I fix this? I looked around the kitchen of the house I owned, the house my son thought he'd bought, the house where his wife had served me coffee in a chipped mug while using the good china for her book club. The savings bond, I said. The one Megan laughed at. Yeah? It's worth $42,000. I bought it the week Marcus was born. I wanted him to have something from me when he turned 18, something that represented patience and time and a grandmother who believed in him. Kevin wiped his face. I didn't know. You didn't ask. Nobody asked. That's the part that hurts the most, Kevin. Not the insult, the assumption. You all assumed that because I serve lunch to children, I have nothing to offer. That's not true. It felt true at that graduation party. He had nothing to say to that. I stood. This house, I'm not taking it back. It's your home, your kid's home. But I want you to know that the roof over your head came from a woman in a hairnet. Mom. And one more thing. I pulled a final document from my bag. I'm converting the warehouse in Newark into transitional housing, 30 units for families coming out of shelters. I need someone to manage the renovation, someone I trust. Kevin looked at the document. You want me to? I want you to build something. Not for a title, not for a salary, for the work itself. Can you do that? He stared at the paperwork for a long time. Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah, I can do that. I drove home that evening through the orange glow of a New Jersey sunset, back to my one-bedroom in Hackensack, back to the thin walls and the clanking radiator and the $700 rent I'd been paying since my son was a boy. I could move anywhere, penthouse in Manhattan, beach house on the shore. Instead, I parked in the same spot I'd been parking in for 20 years and walked up 2 flights of stairs to my front door. Still with me? Comment still here so I know. Real talk. In my position, would you forgive him right away or make him earn it? Drop, forgive, or earn it? Quick note. Some details ahead are fictionalized for impact. If this isn't your thing, no worries. But if you're staying, what happened next with the Driscolls changed everything. The IRS executed search warrants on the Driscoll dry cleaning locations on a Tuesday morning. I wasn't there. I was at Franklin Elementary, sliding trays of scrambled eggs onto the serving line at 7:30. Linda, my coworker, noticed I was quieter than usual. "You okay, Dot?" "Fine. Just tired." "You've been tired for 30 years. Gets worse before it gets better." That afternoon, Janet called. "It's done. 3 locations raided. Gerald and Patricia Driscoll are being charged with tax evasion, money laundering, and structuring financial transactions to avoid reporting requirements. Kevin, cooperating fully. Agent Harmon says his testimony is solid. He's protected. And Megan? She's retained her own attorney. Filed for separation yesterday." I wasn't surprised. The Driscoll family protected their money before their people. Megan had learned that arithmetic early. When the assets were frozen, she'd calculated exactly what Kevin was worth without her parents' cash flowing in. The answer was a marketing director's salary and a house he didn't actually own. That Sunday, Kevin brought Marcus and Emma to my apartment. First time in 4 years any of them had been inside. Marcus, 18 now, tall and quiet like his grandfather, looked around the small kitchen. "You really live here, Grandma?" 30 years. "But you have all those properties." "I have those properties because I live here. Every dollar I didn't spend on a bigger apartment went into the next building. That's how you build something." Emma sat on my couch and pulled out her tablet. "Can I use your Wi-Fi?" "Don't have it." She looked at me like I'd said I didn't have oxygen. Kevin sat at my kitchen table, where I'd signed 31 property deeds over 3 decades. He looked around at the framed photos on the wall. Him as a baby, his kindergarten graduation, a photo of us at Coney Island, him on my shoulders, both of us laughing. "I forgot about that picture," he said. "I didn't." He turned the savings bond envelope over in his hands. I'd given it back to him, note still inside. "For Marcus, your grandmother believes in you." "Mom, I want to ask you something." "Go ahead." "Why do you still work at the school? You could have retired 20 years ago." I thought about it. The answer was simpler than he expected, because Mrs. Patterson's 2nd graders need someone who remembers their names, because Deshaun Williams won't eat breakfast unless I put extra syrup on his pancakes, because when I'm standing behind that counter with my hairnet on, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Kevin wiped his eyes. "I spent my whole life thinking your job defined you. It does define me, just not the way you thought." 4 months later, the Newark warehouse renovation was complete. Kevin managed the project from start to finish. He was there every morning at 6, working alongside contractors, learning plumbing from a man named George, who'd been installing pipes since the 70s. Kevin's hands were calloused. His marketing director wardrobe collected dust. The grand opening was on a Saturday in February. 30 families received keys to transitional apartments. Each unit was clean, warm, furnished with basics donated by community organizations. A woman named Claudia Rivera approached me near the entrance. She was 34, a home health aide, mother of 2. She'd been living in her sister's basement for 8 months. "Mrs. Callahan," her voice shook, "I just want you to know, my kids are going to have their own bedrooms for the first time. You earned this, Claudia. Your application was strong. 2 years of steady employment, clean record, references from your patients. You didn't need charity. Why did you build this?" I looked at the building. Fresh paint, clean windows, a playground in the courtyard where kids were already climbing. Because I spent 30 years wearing a hairnet, and nobody thought I was building anything. Turns out I was building this. Kevin stood off to the side, clipboard in hand, coordinating the move-in schedule. He looked tired. He looked different. He looked like someone who understood that a hard day's work left better marks than a country club membership. Marcus walked over to me. He was holding the savings bond, now cashed and deposited into a college fund I'd helped him set up. "Grandma." He hesitated. "I'm sorry about the graduation party. I should have said something when she laughed at your gift. You were 18. You didn't know what you didn't know." "I know now." "Then you're ahead of where your father was at your age." He smiled. Small but real. That night, I went home to my apartment. Same one bedroom, same clanking radiator, same view of the parking lot. On my kitchen wall, I'd framed the savings bond envelope, not the bond itself, just the envelope with the note. For Marcus, your grandmother believes in you. Megan had tossed it on the table like garbage. Marcus had turned it into a future. My phone rang. Kevin. Mom, I just got home. The kids are in bed. How are you? Tired. Good tired. The kind of tired you feel after you actually did something. I smiled. I know that feeling. Mom, I need to tell you something. His voice dropped. I've been thinking about what you said, about how you wanted to see who I'd become without knowing about the money. And I became someone who was embarrassed by his own mother. I became someone who let his wife throw away a gift because it didn't look expensive enough. I became exactly the kind of person I should have been ashamed of. Kevin, let me finish. I've been managing this renovation for 4 months. I've learned more about work, real work, in 4 months than I learned in 15 years of corporate marketing. And every time I drive past your apartment and see your light on at 10 o'clock at night, I think about all the years you sat in there, building an empire nobody could see. And I was too busy being impressed by Megan's parents' money to notice my own mother was extraordinary. I didn't say anything for a moment. The radiator clicked. A car horn blew outside. Have I earned your forgiveness yet? He asked. You earned something better, I said. My respect. He was quiet. I heard him breathing on the other end of the line. Then, very softly, that means more than any amount of money. That's the whole point, Kevin. Good night, Mom. Good night. And Kevin? Yeah? That savings bond wasn't spare change. It was 28 years of a grandmother believing her grandson would become someone worth believing in. Don't let her be wrong. He hung up. I sat in my kitchen, the apartment quiet around me. I could move tomorrow. I could live anywhere. Penthouse on the Hudson. A brownstone in Park Slope. Instead, I stay here, in this $700 apartment with the clanking radiator and the thin walls, because this place reminds me every single day that wealth isn't what you own. It's what you build with your hands, your choices, and your refusal to let anyone else decide what you're worth. Tomorrow morning, I'll wake up at 5. I'll put on my hairnet and my non-slip shoes. I'll stand behind the counter at Franklin Elementary and serve breakfast to children who need a warm meal and a smile, not because I have to, because there's purpose in every tray I fill. 31 properties, $28 million. And I still clock in at 6 in the morning because the woman in the hairnet was never less than. She was always building something. And to you listening to this story, remember this. God doesn't measure us by our job titles or our bank accounts. He measures us by what we do when nobody's watching. For 30 years, I mopped floors and served lunches and bought buildings and said nothing. Not because I was hiding, because I was trusting that the work would speak for itself. And it did. Just not on my timeline. If your family has ever looked past you, if someone you love has ever made you feel invisible, know this. Your labor has dignity. Your patience has power, and the people who underestimate you today will need you tomorrow. Share this video with someone who's ever felt unseen because of what they do for a living. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about ordinary people who refuse to be ordinary. And if this story moved you, leave a comment. Tell me your story. I want to hear it. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time is valuable, and I'm honored you spent it here. Please note, some stories on this channel contain fictionalized elements created for educational and entertainment purposes. If this content isn't your style, feel free to explore other videos. There's something here for everyone. God bless you. And remember, it was never spare change. It was legacy.